Okay, so we are back once again on the session on financial planning, and we're going to discuss further some of the tools, techniques of personal financial planning. So we stopped at this slide in the previous session. So we talked about that before going towards financial planning, we first need to evaluate the financial position of the clients. That what is the current financial position of the clients? Okay, that for example, if you're going for any of the goals in future, be it your retirement planning, your home loan, your car loan, for not home loan or car loan, like for the purpose of creating your own home, your own car. For that purpose, you need to see how much corpus you need to have for that target or that goal. And a person who is helping you to have sufficient corpus at that point of time, so that person must be able to evaluate your current financial position also. That person has to see that how much current income you have, how much expenses you have, fixed expenses you have, how much EMI you have. So that can create a condition on the basis of that a future corpus can be like decided upon. The person who is helping you to create that future corpus, he cannot say you to like invest 50,000 per month. The salary might be just 30,000 per month. So how that one can person advise you to invest 50,000 rupees per month, right? So that is why your current financial position you have to tell to that person. You are a client, you have to tell to that manager that what is your current financial position, and on the basis of that, your sufficient corpus will be like decided upon. Be it you have to contribute 30,000 per month or 20,000 per month or rupees is 500 rupees per month. So that is as per your contribution and as per your financial position. Okay. Then the preparation of the household budget, that you have to prepare a sufficient household budget. For example, how much expenses you are incurring or making in a particular month. Analysis of the household budget. Are those expenses necessary or not? Are they for needs or wants, or like for what purposes? If the majority are for wants, then you must cut down those expenses and invest that want ka proportion into investment. Contingency planning. So by contingency planning, we mean some kind of emergency can take place. So contingency is something that is dependent upon an event happening. अगर event हुआ then पैसा जाएगा, अगर event नहीं हुआ then पैसा नहीं जाएगा. So it is contingent upon an event. These kinds of situations can also come in, like for example, COVID came in, and like families had to spend like lakhs of rupees in the COVID-19 pandemic, like for their own family members, and still they lost them. So that is something called contingency planning. So for the purpose of contingency planning, also you must have some liquid cash or some liquid amount with you. Estimating financial goals. You have to set what financial goal you have, and you must be very precise. It is not mandatory to have just one financial goal, that you think that my one financial goal is just retirement planning and the rest of the goals are not so important, and for those goals I will be doing with my income. No, because the income you are like not, you are investing a certain amount, and the remaining part of your income is going towards your EMI and your expenses and so on, right? So this thing has also been taken into consideration. The role of debt you have to take it, how much debt you can afford to take, is the debt necessary or not? Because a large number of businessmen and big people take debt for the creation of an assets, but we as laymen belonging to the middle class family, we people take debt for the purpose of our luxury items. Then financial pressures from debt, because ultimately if you are taking a debt up to a great extent, there can be some financial pressures also. There can be situations where you might lose your job, or like you might be shifting from one place to another. At that point you might be searching for a new job. At that time, who's going to pay your debt? Ultimately you have to pay your debt, and if you're not paying your debt, the interest charges will increase and your CIBIL score will go down. Debt counseling. There are professional debt counselors in the form of your investment managers only, and they tell you that how much debt you can afford to take, how much to prepay the debt, how much to pay the debt. So all these things they take into scenario. Okay. Then there's the calculating the debt service requirement. So you have to see debt service requirement. You have to see how much debt you can pay. For example, you have taken a loan at a 7% rate of interest, be it home loan or car loan, because that loans you get at a very low rate of interest. So that you have to see how much EMI you can afford to pay. Ideally, they say that it should not increase 33% of your income. Okay, so 33% of your income, that is good, but ultimately you have to see your other requirements also. If your needs at that time are more than the more than the 33% of your income, at that time you might have to spend a lesser amount of 33% on your loan EMI and extend the loan to a longer time period. Investments for liquidity and financial goals. You have to say how much you can invest for the purpose of liquidity, for current cash that you must have, maybe for some emergencies or contingencies, and for the financial goals. And like ultimately, your financial goals can be retirement planning, contingency, not contingency, like the retirement planning, your buying a home, buying a car, child marriage, education, anything else. Okay. I'm going to talk about the comprehensive financial planning. So it includes your evaluating the financial positions of clients and financial planning, and some kinds of ratios are used there, like some mathematical ratios and financial ratios are used for comprehensive financial planning. And these ratios are too simple to understand. These are not like no more complicated. You have savings ratio and how much you are savings out of the income that you are receiving. Expense ratio, how much expenses you are making out of the income that you are receiving. So ultimately, savings and expense ratio are kind of related to each other. Like whatever income you have, like you expense or like you spend that amount, the remaining amount is savings, right? The assets and liabilities you have to see like the leverage ratio you have to see that how much assets you have to support your liabilities, and ultimately your assets must be more than the liabilities, right? Like just in case your liabilities, like you have to pay your liabilities on an urgent basis, so you must have more assets. नेट वर्थ कितनी है? योर नेट वर्थ इज नथिंग बट योर एसेट्स माइनस द लाइबिलिटीज। जब तुम लाइबिलिटीज को पे ऑफ कर देते हो, उसके बाद जो तुम्हारे पास फाइनल कॉर्पस बचता है, दैट्स योर नेट वर्थ। सॉल्वेंसी रेशियो, तुम कितना पे ऑफ कर सकते हो, कितना तुम्हारे पास पैसा है कि तुम इंसॉल्वेंट नहीं होगे, राइट? और लिक्विड एसेट्स एंड लिक्विडिटी रेशियो इज देयर, लाइक यू हैव टू सी हाउ मच लिक्विड एसेट्स, करंट एसेट्स you have. Financial assets ratio, how much stock, equity, real estate, all these things you have. Debt to income ratio you have to take. Okay, how much debt to income you have, like prepare the household budget ultimately. All these ratios are here. Total liabilities by total assets, solvency ratios or net worth by total assets. Right. So we'll begin with your evaluating the financial position of clients and financial planning. So it is basically its ability to manage its current and future needs and expenses. Because ultimately you're preparing the corpus for future. You have to manage your future needs expenses. Also, you have to take into consideration the present scenario as well. The financial planning helps apportion the available current income to immediate expenses and savings for the future, because you are like apportioning, matlab you are taking out a part of your current income and saving for the future expenses. Now the efficiency with which the interplay between income and expenses, assets and liabilities are handled by the household determines its financial position. ये कितनी efficiency से, right, you are managing your income, expenses, your assets and liabilities, that will ultimately determine your future financial position. Insurance planning is an essential element of a financial plan, and that we'll talk about in the subsequent session, like which kind of insurance to take, how much insurance to take. Now, insurance is an efficient way of protecting the household finances from a loss of income or a large unexpected expense that can derail the financial position. So these things you also have to take into consideration, because something can happen to you and you might not live at that time, and you might have some loan expenses and EMI expenses also, so that you have to take into consideration as well. Okay. Similarly, meeting income needs in retirement is an important concern and financial goal for all households. Because of these things also have to be taken into consideration, that you're going for the purpose of retirement, how much corpus you must have that can sustain your living. Like maybe you retire at the age of 60, so that you have to see कि 80 तक तुम अगर जीने की तुम्हारी life expectation है, how much amount you must have with you. Now, these ratios are calculated using this income, expenses, savings, investment data for each client and gives a numerical snapshot. So, all these things are taken into consideration while deciding a future corpus. All these ratios. It helps identify areas that require and helps set the course of action for the future ultimately. Personal finance ratios. So, all these ratios play a vital role. And all these things have to be taken into consideration while creating your corpus. Yeah. Then you have your savings ratio, the first ratio that we're going to talk about, the savings ratio and expenses ratio. So when we talk about the saving ratio is the percentage of annual income that a person is able to save. For example, your annual income is rupees 5 lakh rupees. Out of that, 10% you can save. 50,000 rupees you are able to save. That's a saving ratio. So if 50,000 you are like able to save from 5 lakh rupees, then 4 lakh 50,000 is your expense ratio. Because ultimately जो save कर रहा है, the remaining part is the expense, and ultimately जो expenses कर रहे हैं, the remaining part is the saving, right? So saving ratio is a percentage of annual income that a person is able to save. Now, saving is not limited to money that is retained in the savings bank account. Money invested in fixed deposits, mutual funds, shares, debentures, public provident fund, national savings certificates, post office deposits, real estate, gold, and others during the year also form part of the savings. So all these things also form part of your savings. ठीक है सेविंग मतलब ये नहीं होता कि सिर्फ बैंक अकाउंट में मनी होता है बिकॉज अ बैंक अकाउंट विल जस्ट गिव यू अ रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ऑफ 3.4%, max to max 4%. Why? Because that bank, see the new bank accounts that come in now, like they give you 4 to 5% rate of interest. Why? Because they want to attract people. At that time, they give you a more rate of interest. And once their operations start like systematized and they go in a good manner, they also reduce the rate of interest. Okay, so it is not only about a saving bank. People think that they are like saving in a saving bank account or like they would be able to accumulate money there. No. Money invested into fixed deposits is also important, into mutual funds, into shares, debentures, public provident fund, national savings certificates, post office deposits. All these things are like different investment avenues in which you can invest your money into. Okay. Then annual income will include all income earned from employment or business in the form of the interest, dividend, rent, and any such items like other items during the year. Because so employment है, business है, interest, dividend, rent, that is the total income. कहीं से भी income आ रही है, that means the total income. Now the savings to income ratio measures the total accumulated savings of an individual relative to the annual income. यहाँ पे example दिया है, total savings per year by the annual income is your formula. Yeah. So यहाँ पे they have given you 6 lakh rupees saved and 60,000 rupees इसमें से save करते हैं. So what's your saving ratio? It's ultimately your total savings per year. Here we are calculating it on an annual basis. So 60,000 rupees the person can save 10% of his annual income, 6 lakh rupees, and 10% the person is saving, and that is the savings ratio. Then savings ratio and expense ratio. The ratio measures the preparedness to meet the long-term goals such as retirement. Okay, the current value of the investment and assets after accounting for any outstanding loans taken to acquire the same is taken to compute the total savings. Because ultimately the saving is nothing कि आपके like for example you got a monthly income of 60,000 rupees, from that you gave like 10,000 rupees for your expenses and like 50,000 rupees of saving. No, you have to also include your EMI also, how much EMI you have to pay, and that would be included as a part of your expenses also. That will have to be taken into consideration. सब कुछ दे के अगर remaining 40 बचता है, that 40 को बेच के अगर remaining 10,000 बचता है, that 10,000 rupees is your saving. Out of that 10,000 rupees, you can get 5,000 rupees on investment and 5,000 rupees as a kind of a liquid cash with you. Then self-occupied home is typically not included when calculating the savings level. Because it's your own home and वहाँ से तुमको कुछ मिल नहीं रहा है and तुम उसमें खुद रह रहे हो. Consider the following information of the financial situation of ABC. His annual salary is 12 lakh rupees. Accumulated investments, including PF balance, value of bank deposits, mutual fund units, EPF NST is 15 lakh rupees. Saving to income ratio कैसे आएगा? 15 lakh by 12 lakh is 1.25. A saving ratio of more than 1 is really great. Because यहाँ पे you are taking into accumulated investments. Ultimately you are saving because you are channelizing your savings into investments. Or like the people who have knowledge about economics, savings are called as leakages to economy. Because ultimately they do not help your corpus to grow nor help the GDP to grow, because investments are a major component of GDP, right? So ultimately if your investments are rising, it's an injection to the economy and that will increase the amount per se. Then a suitable savings to income ratio in the early 40s is at least 3 times the annual income. A suitable saving ratio must be at least 3 times your annual income, but it must be as high as possible. And how to calculate the expense ratio? Expense ratio is nothing but your annual recurring expenses divided by your annual income. Annual recurring expenses divided by your annual income. Or we can find it out by 1 minus the savings ratio, because if you have 100 rupees, 40 rupees you have saved, 60 rupees are your expenses only. If out of 100 rupees, 60 rupees you have used as expenses, 40 rupees are your savings only, right? Now, expense ratio can be calculated as 1 minus savings ratio, and saving ratio is 1 minus expense ratio. Now, they've given the formula in the earlier example. If ABC had saved 60 rupees, 60,000 rupees out of the income of 6 lakh, then remaining कितना बच गया उसके पास 5,40,000 rupees बच गया. So that person has saved 60 rupees with itself. It means 5,40,000 rupees is the expenses. And how to calculate the expense ratio? 5,40,000 divided by 6 lakh rupees, 90%. Okay, let's look at this. Let me see the live chat as well. Okay. Yeah. Talking about the assets and liabilities. So when we talk about the total assets, savings of the individuals are deployed in various forms of physical and financial assets, such as shares, your debentures, your mutual funds, your real estate, gold, provident fund, superannuation fund, others over a period of time. They are ultimately your assets because we're putting in money there. The current value of these assets constitutes the investor's total assets. Right? So what is the value of those assets? I'm not taking into consideration the appreciation amount, the value currently. Appreciate होकर भी जो value आई that is your total assets. Physical assets such as real estate is typically acquired with a combination of savings and loans, because they cost you like 5 crore, 4 crore, like 3 crore rupees for like 2 BHK or 3 BHK, right? So for that amount, you must have a sufficient corpus with either or do it through savings or loans. Then total liabilities. Liabilities include loans and different forms of credit taken to meet expenses or to acquire assets. These may be taken from institutional sources such as banks and financial institutions, or from personal sources such as friends and relatives. Now, liabilities may be long-term, short-term. Because basically, total liabilities are something that you have taken something on credit and you have to like repay that. Okay, so that amount that you are repaying is nothing but your liabilities. Now they talk about the leverage ratio. Your leverage ratio means how much debt you have taken as compared to your total assets. Okay, and ultimately the debt must be lower as compared to total assets, because if the debt is more and the assets are lower, at a time of some contingency you might have to repay the debt and the assets तुम्हारे पास होंगे नहीं, and that can be a nightmare situation for you. Okay, so debt to asset ratio, it says this is a measure of the role of debt in the asset build-up of the investor. Uh, it is calculated as the total liabilities by total assets. Higher the leverage, more risky it is for the individual's financial situation. A ratio greater than 1 indicates that the assets will not be adequate to meet the liabilities. And why will the ratio be like greater than 1? Talk about mathematically. When your denominator is less than your numerator, it means total assets are less than your total liabilities. In that case, you have more total liabilities and less total assets. That creates a problem ultimately, right? Then the ratio is likely to be high immediately after a large ticket asset, such as real estate, is purchased with a debt. And, and like uh, over the time, as the value of the asset appreciates, the ratio will also come down. Because जब real estate की value बढ़ती जाएगी and asset का loan भी कम होता जाएगा. The net worth. Strong asset position is of no use if most of these are acquired through loans that are outstanding. Okay, like for example, if a person has assets, but that assets have been acquired all through loans, so it's not an asset ultimately because you have to repay them. And क्या पता वो assets पे बेचना पड़े to pay off that loan. Similarly, a liability is not bad if it has been used for creating an asset, such as real estate, which has the potential to appreciate in value. Right? The real estate खरीद रहे हो, and that might have a potential to appreciate in value, because I told you, businessmen take debt for the purpose of creation of the asset and not for the luxury items. It is therefore normal to monitor an investor's financial position through the net worth. So net worth you have to see of an investor, how much he is making. And the formula for the net worth is nothing but your total assets minus total liability. Like for example, the person had the total assets of 65, the total liabilities were 13, his net worth is 52 lakhs. A net worth is monitored over a period of time to monitor improvement or the deterioration in the financial position. So these things are taken into consideration while calculating the net worth. Next, we have the solvency ratio. Despite having assets, a person may be insolvent if the liabilities are higher than the value of the assets held. A critical benchmark is that the individual's net worth should be positive. See, in this case, I told you, like when you were talking about the leverage ratio, if assets become a liability, then it can create a problem. So that is why your net worth should be positive. So your solvency ratio basically states the extent to which the investor's solvency can be determined through the solvency ratio is net worth by total assets. Solvency ratio is nothing but your net worth by total assets. For the same asset position, higher the solvency ratio, stronger the investor's financial position. For the same asset position, higher the solvency ratio, stronger the investor's financial position. Because ultimately, why this ratio would be higher? Your assets are less, but your net worth is more. Because ultimately, still your net worth is positive. Because out of those assets, you have paid off the liabilities. Now again, as your savings and expense ratio are related to each other, your leverage and solvency ratios are also related to each other. Your leverage ratio can be calculated as 1 minus solvency ratio. Your solvency ratio can be calculated as 1 minus leverage ratio. Okay. When talking about your liquid assets are those assets that can be easily converted into cash at a short notice to meet expenses or emergencies. For example, some saving bank deposits, like people can withdraw that money, some fixed deposits and all, but those also take time to get mature. For bank account, like you might have to go to the bank might be closed, the ATM might not be working and all. And even like in fixed deposit, like they charge some penalty and they can take some time to have the amount in your bank account. Right. So the liquid asset is something I mean the most liquid asset is cash because ultimately you must have cash with yourself. Okay. So liquid assets are those assets that can be easily converted into cash at short notice to meet expenses or emergencies. Liquid assets include money in savings bank account, fixed deposits which mature within 6 months, investments in liquid funds or other mutual funds, and such other short-term assets. Okay. Then you have the liquidity ratio. The role of the liquid assets is to meet the near-term liquidity needs of the individual. Okay. It is a normal to calculate the liquidity needs as the expenses an investor will incur over the following 6 months. You have to the liquidity needs. कि कितना liquidity you have with yourself. You have some enough assets, some enough like basically your like current assets are taken to purposes. Like if you're like running a business, your current assets in the form of cash, bank balances, inventories, debtors, and all those stuffs. And so you must have enough current assets to pay off those monthly expenses. A ratio of at least 4 to 6 indicates a comfortable position to meet its expenses for 4 to 6 months, even if there is a decline in the regular income. Then they've talked about the liquid assets and the liquidity ratio. For example, the monthly expenses, including the loan repayment, are 1.5 lakhs. The liquid assets are 13 lakhs. And the liquid ratio कितना आ जाएगा? Your liquid assets जितने तुम्हारे पास है 13 lakhs and 1.5 lakhs is the monthly expense. The ratio of around 6 indicates a comfortable financial position to manage short-term obligations. Another liquidity ratio that is tracked is a liquid assets to net worth ratio. A liquid assets to net worth ratio is also tracked there. This ratio has to be interpreted in the light of the goal of the individual. If there is a longer period to the goal, then the ratio must be low. मतलब अगर goal दूर है, maybe you are like your retirement planning or building up your home, then the ratio must be low at that time. A high ratio would indicate that a large proportion of savings are held in liquid assets and were earning low returns. अगर high ratio है, इसका मतलब ये होगा तुमने ऐसे assets में अपना पैसा लगाया है जो तुमको low returns देते हैं. ठीक है. This will affect the ability to meet the regular long-term goals efficiently. If goals have to be met in the near term, then adequate assets must be held. Adequate assets must have for you. The goals are to be met in the real term scenario, like or in the present, like the near future, basically. When they talk about the financial assets ratio, the assets can broadly be categorized as financial assets. You have your shares, you have your debentures, you have your bank deposits, you have a public provident fund, you have mutual fund investments and others. And physical assets, you have gold, precious metals, diamonds, real estate, right? So all these are kinds of your financial assets which can give you a certain return, which will give you is not guaranteed, but which can give you. Your bank deposits, PPF and all will give you some return because those are fixed income instruments. So your gold will also give because it tends to be stable. Precious metals like diamonds might also give. The real estate is like cyclical. At times of inflation, it gives you return. When the kind of the at the time when the real estate sector is on a boom, right? Shares like mutual funds can give you the negative returns or no returns also. Financial assets have the advantage of greater liquidity, flexibility, convenience of investing, ease of maintaining investments. So all those things are there with the financial investments. Okay. So these things have to be taken into consideration. Also, they are primarily income generating investments. So some of them, such as equity oriented, are held for long term appreciation. Your fixed deposits, PPF, bonds, debentures are for like fixed income. Where equity oriented investments are held for long term capital appreciation. And there's a greater ease of investing in such assets as it lends itself to a small and frequent investments. Okay. Higher proportion of financial assets is preferred. So that is one thing that you have to take into consideration as well. Okay. That's all for today. I'll talk about more in the next session.